Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Impact Series. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our first ever multi-stream, which we're so excited about. So you should be able to view this live stream on the Anthem Instagram, the Anthem LinkedIn, or the Anthem Facebook pages. So we hope you are joining us from any of those channels here today. This is our favorite time of the week because it is our opportunity to talk with all of our amazing winners who are working on incredible projects all around the world on so many different issue areas that impact people. So we're just so excited to get started today. I'm Jessica Lauretti. I'm the managing director of the Anthem Awards. The Anthem Awards is brought to you by the Webby Awards and is a brand new award and platform and community to honor purpose and mission driven work from brands, nonprofit organizations, and individuals from all around the world. We're currently in our second season, and we have our final entry deadline coming up on Friday, September 23rd. If you haven't entered your work in, you can still have a chance to enter in the next few weeks. You can find all the information that you need to know about entry on our website at anthemawards.com. And we have a customer service team. So if you need help with going through the categories or thinking about where to place your work, we're here to help. Please reach out to our team at kara@anthemawards.com. And we'll get started. We have an amazing guest here today. I would love to welcome Heather Ahtone, Director of Curatorial Affairs at the First American Museum. Thank you so much for joining us today, Heather. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm really excited to represent our museum and our project. And we were so honored to receive the Anthem Award in last year's round.
Yeah, congratulations on being an inaugural winner. And thank you for all the work that you do. So tell us, let's start by just talking about what your project is and how it came to be and everything. So the name of the project is OKLA HOMMA, and it is an exhibition that provides an in-depth history and examination of contemporary experience of First Americans. So start off by tell us about the name OKLA space HOMMA. Can you tell us about that and what that means and how that came to be?
Sure. Well, so most people know that the part of American history, and a very important part of it, is the relocation of the 67 tribes that were relocated to Oklahoma to make way for the establishment of the United States. This was a process that took literally 200 years for some of our communities as they vacated lands to make way for the colonies as they came in. But these tribes were relocated into Oklahoma. And just to give people an example, we have 39 tribes in Oklahoma today. That is the equivalent of taking the 44 tribal nations or 44 nations of Europe and relocating them to the space of the island of England, just the island of England. And the incredible cultural diversity that would generate is what we live with here in Oklahoma. We're a largely rural state, but our tribal communities represent 1/4 of the Native Americans that are recognized within the population of the United States. So there's a great strength of culture here, a beautiful diversity of philosophies and worldviews, and also a pretty generous economic force for our state and for our communities. And our museum has the opportunity to speak to the history, the arts, and the culture of the 39 tribes.
That's such an interesting way to think about if you kind of crushed all of Europe into just the UK. Thank you so much for sharing that background on that. Can you talk a little bit about the First American Museum and also this exhibit in particular? What do you think visitors can expect to see and experience when they come to take a look?
So I've had the privilege of leading a team of 11 tribal members. Myself, I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation and also descended from the Choctaw Nation. I have relatives in the Kiowa community and also married into the Navajo community. We had 11 members of our team who helped build a story that expresses that diversity. And the First Americans Museum is both built as a cosmological site, and we can talk about that this time or another time. But the exhibition specifically of Oklahoma was intended to tell that collective story of our 39 tribes, of the history prior to colonization. We wanted to remind people that we have a history on this continent that goes back millennia, millennia, millennia. And then moving forward into the relocation into Oklahoma, what that relocation, what that removal period was like for our communities, and then also what our tribal nations, which are sovereign nations, have had to do to rebuild our capacity to take care of our citizens within a nation state of the United States. It's a very complex story. The title Oklahoma for the gallery comes from the Reverend Allen Wright, who was a Choctaw citizen, who, after the removal, said that this should be the land of Oklahoma. Okla in Choctaw, the Choctaw language is people, and Homa is red. And so there was the idea that this state would be called that, and it did eventually become that. The state name is a variation, sort of an anglicized variation of that. We pulled it apart into the customary presentation that the Choctaw language uses, to just kind of remind people about the primary and priority our languages require and deserve.
Yeah, wow, some interesting Oklahoma history, probably not a lot of people know about. Tell us about your role and at the museum, and how did you become a part of this? And tell us about what you did there.
So my position is Director of Curatorial Affairs. When I was hired, I was actually, the title was Senior Curator, and quite frankly, it's like many titles, it's the same job. But I was hired by our director, his name is James Pepper Henry, who was hired to, he's a citizen of the Choctaw Nation. He's actually vice chair of their tribe as well. And he's also descended from the Muskogee Nation. And he was hired to come and open this museum and provide the kind of leadership from his decades. I think he's been in the museum industry for going on 30 years, 25 years, and as a director, which is pretty unique to have an Indigenous person who's also a museum director. He came and hired me away from the University of Oklahoma, where I was the curator of Native American and non-Western art at the Fred Jones Museum there on campus. And like museum directors at the time, there were not a lot of Indigenous people working and as curators. So he asked me to come and bring some vision and some leadership. I've had the privilege of working in this state for coming up on 25 years as a arts organizer and as a curator, and working with the community and developing projects prior to this where there was a lot of collaboration. And we use our cultural philosophy to build these exhibitions. So that means working with respect and reciprocity, building relationships, and also carrying the responsibilities, which as a curator largely means making sure that we meet deadlines and we get the exhibitions prepared on time, on schedule, and on budget. But it is also a matter of giving consideration and assuming an authority on behalf of the museum to work with the tribes and create space for them to help us to tell the story that they want to represent them. You may know, Jessica, Native Americans have been part of museum exhibits since the very first installation that was done in Independence Hall in Philadelphia. And that exhibition was taxidermied American animals and Native American cultural materials. But until about 30 years ago, Native Americans were not part of the storytelling and the authority within museums. First Americans Museum is not the first to do that. Of course, we can recognize the National Museum of the American Indian. We can also look at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center in Albuquerque. And then, of course, there's a great history of tribes running their own museums. But this is unique in that we have such a large constituency of 39 cultures and tribal nations to represent and to tell their stories and to work with them as full partners in the process. Very complex project. And I was really grateful for the members of our curatorial team that supported this work.
Yeah, that's amazing. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I mean, I think as you identified, growing up, so many times you've been to a museum and you've seen images or, some kind of portrayal of natives, and to talk about, how actually having that native-led perspective being behind the representation, and also, the diversity in the number of tribes that you're trying to represent. Those are, I think, like it's not just enough to have, one native voice to represent all of those different people. So can you talk about those two aspects and how important that is?
Yeah, so in addition to that comparison that we make with Europe, which is very effective, I think, for people to
Mhm.
understand the complexity of our
Right.
cultural environment, in addition to the cultural diversity, we actually have more languages spoken in our indigenous communities in Oklahoma than all of Europe. We have 12, we have languages that descend out of 12 unique language families. Some of
Mhm.
them have relationships because of their historical proximity to one another. Even like the Choctaw and Chickasaw communities actually come from a single origin story and
Mhm.
through various migrations landed in different spaces. All of this being said, the team to work on this really, there were a small number of us that were experienced museum curators, but there were people that I knew that we needed their knowledge skills in order to
Mhm.
build the kind of exhibitions that we wanted to accurately depict and represent our communities. I'd like to just take a moment, if you don't mind, Jessica. I'd like to acknowledge the other members of the curatorial team because so
Yeah.
often they just get embodied as the all native curatorial team. But it was
Right.
Gina Timberman, Leslie Half Moon, Welena Queton, Hallie Winter, Marianne Parker, Zach Rice, John Hamilton, Rance Wariakwe, Alicia Harrison, Chelsea Herr. And each of them is a tribal community member.
Mhm.
They are all here in Oklahoma. And
Mhm.
what I saw that as an experienced curator that I could I could manage the sort of structural parts of it, but I needed
Mhm.
a different knowledge sets in order to do what we needed to do. So, for instance, Zach Rice is a linguist, and he helped us to make sure that we were accurately representing languages. He worked with many of the communities to bring in the language that we have. John Hamilton is one of our community broadly well recognized song keepers, and he helped us to make sure that we incorporated music in a way that was both meaningful, relevant to where we were placing it, and thinking about the cultural impacts that music, which many of our communities will say that 85% of our cultural knowledge and history is actually in the songs more than it is in
Mhm.
books or the other kinds of resources that are
Interesting.
commonly recognized as knowledge keepers.
Mhm.
Rance Wariakwe and Gina Timberman. Gina Timberman had a long history with this project and brought a great wealth of knowing the community members and helping us to navigate the building the relationships with all 39 tribes. The
Mm.
tribes had the opportunity to help us to make sure that the information we were providing was accurate, that it represented them in a way that was authentic to their storytelling. We had them we asked them questions about where was their Garden of Eden. We have a map in the gallery that shows where all the tribal gardens of Eden happen on this continent. We
Mhm.
have some animated stories that tell just a glimpse into the epic stories of our creation stories that are really important when providing people a lens into Indigenous culture, because many people will think of like the Genesis story of the Bible as a critical moment, right, in a biblical sense or a religious sense. But the truth is, out of that story of God creating the earth, creating the animals and all the things on the earth, and then creating man and putting man in charge and giving man dominance over that, right, dominion over it.
Mhm.
That lays the foundation for capitalism. It lays a foundation for the capacity to see land as an asset. All
Right.
of our cultures globally have creation stories, but
Mhm.
very rarely and almost uniquely, this Christian story becomes the one where man is in charge of all of it. And this
Mm.
is what shifts our worldviews. We've tried to share that with people so that they could understand our
Mm.
worldviews of living in relationship and with respect to nature, to the earth, to the
Mhm.
cosmos, to the animals with whom we share the surface of the earth, to recognize that that's a valid worldview
Right.
and that each of us comes from our own story. But bringing in all the strength of music, knowledge, policy, law,
Right.
all of this was really important to us. Alicia and Chelsea were our image researchers and helped us to identify about 3,000 images. And we
Mm.
used over 600 of them in the gallery. So it's a very dense but quite beautiful space. And it's a place where we tell the story of the tribes, of their history from origins to the period of removal, but most critically, how our ancestors laid a foundation for us to survive into the 21st century, to bring our cultures, our languages, our ceremonies with us. And we're able to now be, stand as resilient evidence of the resilience that they brought and carried into this space.
It's amazing that you're able to bring together so many partners to really tell such a comprehensive story, as you noted, across language and art and ceremony and all of these things. That's really beautiful storytelling. Can you tell us a little bit about the First Americans Museum? Is there's something about the unique architectural design of the museum, the significance of the way it was built, some of the backstory for folks who aren't familiar?
Yes, and I don't know if you have any images of the museum. I don't actually know how to share them doing what we're doing, but the museum, I mentioned, is a cosmological site. We
Yeah.
have so we have this grand metal structure that is a 110-foot high homage to the Wichita grass huts. The Wichita and the Caddo people were original inhabitants of this land, and in fact, there were Wichita villages not too far from where we are now. We also have ancestral ties for the Apache and Tonkawa communities. And while we think about the tribes that were brought into Oklahoma as being part of the removal, the tribes that were here actually had to be removed out of the space in order to allow for the other tribes to be brought in. So every tribe here had some experience with that removal. So that grand structure of the Wichita grass hut, which sits at 110 feet high, and it's matched by a 90-foot high mound that creates a circle. And so the whole facility is on this circular structure. And the mound, which is an important homage because of the 39 tribes here, 30 of them have ancestral ties to the mound builders and the mound cultures that were present all the way from the Gulf of Mexico, as many people might know, but all the way up into Wisconsin. And so all the way through the eastern half of the United States, mounds were a part of the architectural, religious, and ceremonial structures. So we have a 21st century mound that sits here and gives us a place. That mound creates a circular envelope to at the top of the mound. The summer solstice sun sets right at the top of the mound.
Wow.
And we have a tunnel that was built, and the mound was built over the tunnel. And the winter solstice sun sets right in the middle of that tunnel. And we have public events where people can come and experience that. And so we really can track the movement of the sun on the annual cycle from summer to winter. When it's on the equinox, we have an arc that is on the eastern cardinal point of the entry of the museum that was a sculpture designed by Bill and Demos Glass, who are Cherokee citizens. And the sun literally rises through that arc and passes directly over our facility. So we are built on an east-west axis and have this lovely physical relationship to the cosmos. And that emerged out of consultations with our tribal communities over about a decade of advice of, if we were able to build the best museum that we could, what would that be like? And aligning it with that historic practice of relationships to the cosmos was something that they gave clear guidance on.
That's so cool. I mean, I love site-specific architecture. We all know, I guess, now where we're going to be on the next solstice. We have
I hope so. I hope so. It's coming up. It's September is coming up. So
yeah, it's almost time for it.
Yeah.
So tell us, what's next for the museum? Do you have new exhibitions you're working on, events, things like that you can share with folks?
Well, so we are getting ready to come up to our first anniversary. So we have a gala event. We're all really excited about that. We're going to honor some people who just, gave their everything to help make us be what we can be. We are also catching our breath a little bit. You can imagine we went from curatorial concept to installation in 30 months for 26,000 square feet of gallery space. So we were really exhausted coming into opening.
Right.
But we're now putting together some plans to, we've listened to the community over the last year and some questions that have repeatedly come up. We're in the process now of putting plans into place to try and address those questions, helping to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that our constituency of the 39 tribes and promoting them and how to access them are really important for our visitors. We're also working really hard to build some small pop-up exhibitions to
Hmm.
address some of the topics that have been repeatedly asked. It's a very dense gallery experience, but it didn't, even at that, at a 700-page script for the panels,
Wow.
there's just no way to tell a whole and complete history of 39 tribes in that. So there are some topics that we sort of thoughtfully said, we're going to hold this back. One, so that we can do very specific changing exhibitions where we explore those topics in a deeper and more meaningful manner. And something that's a practice of museums is to publish catalogs related to the exhibitions. And
Mm.
so if we can take, pulling those out gave us a chance to do catalogs on those that will help address those topics in a more deep and meaningful manner, rather than simply only addressing them within the buried heavy weight of all the stories that we're juggling within the Oklahoma Gallery.
Right, right. Amazing. I hope everyone will go and stop and take a visit on their road trips this summer when they come through Oklahoma. Tell us a little bit about what is your favorite part about what you do? What do you love about what you do?
Gosh, I love reading, I love writing, and all of that is something that this sort of field of working in museums allows me to do. But the thing that for me is the most, say, rewarding, and I think that's really where your question is getting to, is the work that to do with the communities, with the tribal communities. I love seeing the little kids. I mean, we see the little kids in there, and at the end of the day, we go through and there's like little nose prints and handprints on the cases because they're just trying to get as close as they can to the things that we presented. That's incredibly rewarding, and getting to listen to elders and help their stories make their way into museums. I mean, I mentioned that until 30 years ago, Native people were not really even seen as an authority. We have the unique opportunity here to bring those stories direct from the community and put them, smack up with the visitors. We've had already over 1 million visitors this year, and that's during the pandemic time that we opened. So I'm really looking forward to how many more that we'll have this coming year, and giving people a chance to hear these stories, not in my voice, not from my written words, but from the voices directly from the community, is incredibly powerful. And I feel like that's where my service to support our cultures and our, the vitality of what we're doing. It is through that process that I feel that we're building a museum, really not for just to honor our ancestors, which I do believe we are, but
Mm.
we're trying to build a museum that's going to welcome and create a welcoming space for the future of Indigenous communities, the
Mm.
future of Americans, and really to bring the world to come and experience this story, because it's a profound story.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine to sit down and to try to tell it. I mean, it's such a huge task. But thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing this with us. Thank you for all of the work that you do. It's so important to tell this story and to share it with the world. Tell everybody out there where they can find out more about the First Americans Museum.
So our website is famok.org, and we are at First Americans Museum on Instagram and on Facebook. Would love to have people come and visit. Would love to share this story. We're an 88% Native staff. So coming here, this is not just about me or my work. This is about everything all of us here are doing. We believe in what we're doing. We believe in our community. We believe in the future of our cultures, and we want to share that with everybody. So please come.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I hope everyone will visit, and I will see you all there in the winter solstice this year. Thank you again, Heather. Thank you for all your work you do. Everyone out there watching, thank you for joining us today. If you missed the conversation, we will be posting it on our YouTube and up on our website in the coming days. Don't forget to get your entries in. Final entry deadline is September 23rd for the second annual Anthem Awards. You're going to want to be a part of this community that we are building of amazing people all over the world who are doing incredible, impactful work. Thank you, Heather. Have an awesome week. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you.